Aleichem to all of you. I assume the Shiur is in English? Yes. Where are people from? Everybody from the United States? Uh-huh. And when did you all get in? This morning. Today? Yesterday. So you're probably somewhat tired? Excited though. So the sugya we will be discussing is Shlichus b'mitzvahs, which is a fascinating sugya, one that is broadly discussed by many gedolim throughout the ages. And my shiur today is somewhat of an introductory shiur, and we will not reach conclusions. I'll leave that up to you in the coming few days, and we'll meet again, I think, Thursday afternoon, just to wrap things up and to see what we achieved in these few days. So Shlichus is one of the broadest sugyas in halacha, and there are many sugyas in Shas that deal with Shlichus, different aspects. But the central sugya is at the beginning of Perek Beis the Kedushin, when the Mishnah says, "Hu ish mekadesh bo v'bishlucho," a person could be mekadesh a wife on his own or with an agent, with a shaliach, and the same goes to the woman. So the first section in the Gemara is important. Every Gemara is important, but it doesn't really affect our sugya. Shlichus menolon. So how do we know the concept of shlichus? How do we know that a shliach is valid, that a person could perform kiddushin with an agent and he doesn't need to do it on his own? And the Gemara brings three different sources from which Chazal learn that shlichus is valid. That when a person needs to do something al pi Torah, he doesn't necessarily need to do it himself. He could do so with an agent, he could do so with a shaliach. And the three sources are gerushin. We learn from a posuk that a person could divorce his wife through a shaliach. Hafroshes trumo, kain tarimu gam atem, v'shilcha mibeisoi. Source number 3 is Shchita sapesach, v'shachtu oisoi kol kahal adas Yisrael. However, let us note, and this is an important observation, even though it seems to be a little nuance, but as we will see, it's more than just the nuance. So when we look at the beginning of the sugya, Shlichus minolon, how do we know that Shlichus is valid? How do we know that there is a din Shlichus in Torah? This Sanya, v'sholach malamet shehu oise shliach, v'shulcha malamet shehi oise shliach, v'sholach v'shulcha malamet shliach oise shliach. Ashkachan gerushin. So the only source we have is gerushin, b'kedushin minolon. How do we know that the same would apply to kedushin? Would divorce be different than engaging a woman or kiddushin? And then the Gemara brings source number 2. If a person makes a shliach for hafroshes trumo, how do we know that that is valid? And the Gemara at the top of Omid Beis, Memar of Omid Beis, Omikro kain tarimu gam atem lerabois es hashaliach. The word gam seems to be for no need. Kain tarimu gam atem. This is source number 2. And this is hafroshes trumes emaises. And then as we go down about 12 lines into the Gemara, Omer Reb Yeshua ben Karcha, menayin sheshlichai shel adam kemoisai shenemar v'shachtu oisei kol kahal adas Yisrael beinu arbaim v'chi kol hakol shoichtim v'aloi eino shoichet elo echad. Is it the entire congregation that actually engages in Shlita? How many people will hold that knife? 10, 20, 30, 100? What does the pasuk mean? V'shachtu oisei kol kahal adas Yisrael v'chi kolam shochetim eino shoichet elo echad mekan sheshlicha shel adam kemoisai. The Rivash is the very first that asks we don't find this phrase, Shlichus shel Odom kemoisai, only Yomid Beis, not in the beginning of the sugya. The Gemara asks, Shlichus menolan. How do we know that Shlichus is valid? And it is only in source number 3 that we find a new expression, a new phrase. Menayin sheshluchai shel Odom kemoisai. Does kemoisai have any meaning? Or all 3 sources are the same? So the Rivash says source number 3 is different than the first 2. The first 2 Chazal merely prove that Shlichus is valid, that a person can do things through an agent, Gerushin and Truma. It is only from source number 3 that we learn Sheshluchai shel Odom kemoisai. So one of the sources we have on our sheet, and we will not necessarily go through the entirety of every source. This is a very lengthy source. I think we should have it on our sheet, on our booklet. The Lekach Toiv, Rabbi Yosef Engel. Now it'll take you a month to go entirely through whatever Rabbi Yosef Engel has to say, and I don't think there really is a need. If you want on your flight back to America to be busy, then take along the booklet and learn through the entire chapter of Lekach Toiv. But let's just see the first paragraph. Nistapakti, Hode Kaimelon, Shluchai shel Odom kemoisai. It is page number 48. Page number 48. Nistapakti, Hode Kaimelon, Shluchai shel Odom kemoisai. Ma'u hakavona beze? Im hakavona shegufay sheshliach nechshav kegufa mishalech, או השליח לאדם אחר נחשב, רק שהמעשה אשר הוא עושה בשליחותו, על כל פנים מתייחסת למשלח, ונחשב שהמשלח עשה המעשה ההוא. או דילמה גם המעשה איננה מתייחסת למשלח, רק לשליח, ונחשב ששליח עשה המעשה לא המשלח, רק שהתורה גזלה שאף שאדם אחר עשה את המעשה, לא הוא עם כל זה, כיוון ששלחו לכך מועילה המעשה של האחר בעבורו. So, this is a question he asks, and in the coming 10 pages, bringing different sources. So let us try to define what are the tzdodim, what are the possibilities he is presenting. And let us just notice the first line. Hodekaimalon shlichai shel odom kemoisai. How far does this go? And how do we understand my agent is like me? Is it fusion, as if we are one? Or maybe no. He's an individual, so am I, but what he does is valid and it counts for me. Would that be the difference between Shlichus Menolan and Shlichus shel Odom kemoisai? An interesting observation. If there will be need, I just need to talk about about this with the Menalim of the yeshiva. Maybe I will be sending some additional materials, just supplementary materials. So many Gedolim. And it is interesting to note Gedolim of the same generation, more or less, presenting the same ideas, but everybody in his own language and everybody in a different style. Reb Shimon Shkop in Shari Yosha, Reb Meir Simcha of Dvinsk in Or Somayach. Reb Yosef Engel was in Poland. Zechi Yitzchak and Panovich, Reb Itzele Panovicher. And more or less come up with the same ideas, but everybody in his own unique style. Shnei dinim b'shlichus. One definition of shlichus would be yichus hama'aseh. And that is one of the possibilities that Yosef Engel is presenting. So Rabbi Yosef Engel lived in Krakow, in Poland, Reb Itzler was in Panovich, Reb Meir Simcha in Dvinsk, Reb Shimon in Grodno. So one possibility is Yichus HaMaaseh. What my agent does is as if I performed. The other definition would be delegating authority. And I give him authority to do whatever needs to be done in my name. Reb Shimon would define that as Mesiras Koyach. I give him the power or delegating authority. So there are two types of dinim, b'dinei Torah. One is echalais. I assume most of you have a yeshiva background. I heard from a Slobodka Talmud going back 60 years, and Reb Cheskel Avramsky used to come once a week from Yerushalayim to Bnei Brak to give a shiur in Slobodka. And Reb Cheskel didn't like to be interrupted when he gave a shiur. You know, there are different minhagim in yeshivas. Sometimes you come into yeshiva by a shiur kloli and it's total chaos. And a stranger wouldn't understand what's going on. Everybody is screaming, everybody is shouting. It's not really how we conduct a conversation. And Reb Cheskel Avramsky didn't like to be interrupted. And there was a young boy that didn't know the rules yet, and he kept on pestering him with questions. Is it a chalois? Is it not a chalois? And Reb Cheskel asked, what is a chalois? What is this term that you're using? Do we say a chalois when we don't know exactly what we mean to say? What is a chalais? So I'll explain to you, what do we mean in yeshivas when we talk about a chalais? A chalais is an act that changes the status either of a person or of a thing, an object. But a chalais is a game changer. It is an act that changes the status. Kiddushin is a chalais because the woman was a pnuya, now she's an eishes ish. So is gerushin. She was an eishes ish, and now she's a pnuya. Now she can get married. Kinyanim are a chalais, because a given object, or whether it's chattel or it's real estate, belonged to Pliny, and now it's transferred to the possession of Almighty. That is what we call a chalais. Hafroshes trumas amaises is a chalais, because tevel is no longer, and the tevel turned into truma or maisa. It is a change of possession. Trumas amaises belong to shevet kahuna or the Levium, and part of the food is transferred from tevel to chulin mitukonim. It was prohibited for consumption, and now it is permitted for consumption. That is what we call a chalais. But when I make a shliach to perform a mitzvah, let it be bedikas chometz or milas haben, that is not a chalais, because the status didn't change, neither of a person nor of an object. What? Yeah, but that has nothing to do with bailis, and it is not changing his status. Yes, we perform the mitzvah of milah. There are some dinim that are different, and oral is also betruma v'bepesach, but that is not what we call a chalais. A chalais always has to do with ownership, with possession, and that is what we call changing the status, either of a person or of an object. So, Pidyon haben would not be a chalais, because maybe the topic next year would be Pidyon haben. How do we define Pidyon haben? Has anything changed for the child? So when we do Pidyon haben, the Kohen asks the father, Ma boyest vei, do you want your child, or will you give me money? As if the Kohen has the object to take the baby. So the Kohen asks the father, Ma boyest vei, do you want your child, or do you want to keep your money? Harav was a Kohen, and Harav had a vort that he used to say at every Pidyon Haben, whenever he performed as a Kohen. And he used to say, what is it that the Kohen is saying? He asked the father, Ma bo yisvei, what do you prefer? So the Panav said, Pidyon Haben is when you become a father and you have your firstborn child. And the Kohen asked the father, it's about time that you take life seriously. What is important to you? Is it your money or your children? That is actually what the Kohen is asking the father. This is your firstborn, different status. From now on, you're a father, you need to care for kids. So what is really important to you? Your money or your children? That's a profound thought for Pidyon Haben. But coming back to our sugya, so there are two types of ma'asim b'Torah. Echalais is any act that demands ownership. Only a person is authorized, has the authority to mekadesh a woman for himself, or to divorce his wife, or to sell his possessions, or to buy what he wants to acquire. So a chalais is delegating authority. That is mesiras koyach. I pass on, I appoint you lif'ol b'tchum ha'ba'alut sheli. But when I make a shliach to perform a mitzvah, like I make the moile shliach to circumcise my son, that is yichus ha'ma'aseh. What you do is considered as if I have done, and it is considered as if I was mekayem my mitzvah. And these are two different gedorim, two different definitions of shaliach. Gerushin is a chalais. Hafroshtes sumas amais is a chalais. Shchitas pesach is not a chalais. It's a mitzvah. It is a mitzvah. And maybe that is why it is only in source number 3 that the Rebbe Shua ben Levi says, Menayin sheshlichoi shalodam kemoisoi. Delegating authority is not kemoisoi. I appoint you as my agent, as we do with lawyers every day. That is not kemoisoi. There's an additional level to Shlichus. When I need to perform a mitzvah, and it is between me and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and I ask you to work on my behalf, that is what we define as kemoisoi. So many gedolim that I mentioned, we only have one in our booklet, but maybe I'll send some additional materials just to emphasize the points better. But then I have a fundamental question. Going back to the Gemara, and everything starts with one blat of Gemara in Mesechet Kedushin in the beginning of Perek Beis that we have on our sheet. So the Gemara being source number 1 is Gerushin. At the bottom of the page, the top of Amid Beis, source number 2 is Truma. Source number 3 is Rebbe Shua ben Korcha v'shachtu oisai kol kahal adas Yisrael mekan sheshlichoi shalodam kemoisoi. And then the Gemara goes into a lengthy discussion. Why do we need 3 different sources? And why would one not be enough? Why is one source not sufficient? And the Gemara gives a tzrichuta. Tzrichuta is one of the 1,000 sugyas in Shas, in which Chazal explain, we cannot learn A from B, or B from A, Aleph from Beis, or the other way around. If the Torah would teach us Shlichus only by Gerushin, we would say, Mala Gerushin, Sheken Yeshnoi Bal Korchoi. Gerushin is easy to delegate to a Shaliach because the power of the husband is so total, he doesn't even need the consent of the other party. So maybe Shlichus applies only to Gerushin. If we would only have Shchitas Kochim, we would say, Chulin Mikochim lo yalfinan. You can't learn Funan from Kochim. If we would only have Truma, we would say, Mala Truma sheken yeshnoi b'machshava. A person could be a mafresh tumas amaisis without doing anything, just in his mind. And this is the nature of tzrichuta. This seems to indicate that fundamentally Shlichus is the same. And if not for these nuances, the difference, Mala Gerishin Sheyeshno Bal Korchoi, Mala Trume Sheyeshno B'machshava, and we can't learn from Kotchem because Chulin Mekotchem Lo Yalfinan. If Reb Shemesh Kap and all the others are right, we need two different psukim for two different concepts. One is delegating authority, and the other is Yichus HaMaaseh. They're different concepts. How could we learn one from the other? So this Gemara seems clearly to indicate, no, we're not dealing with fundamentally different concepts. If not for the nuances, Chulin Mekotchim Lo Yalfinan, Trume Yeshna B'machshava, Gerushin Yeshna B'korchoi, we could learn one from the other. And therefore, that would not be the difference between Kemoisai and Shlichus Menorah. So in my forum, I dealt extensively with the sugya of Shlichus. And what I fundamentally argued, the idea of Shlichus is one. And that is, whatever a person needs to do, he doesn't necessarily need to do with his hands or his feet or his body or his own. Yes, the Torah recognizes the possibility of a person appointing an other to do things on his behalf, and that is valid. So things are nuanced, and a chalois is not exactly the same as milas haben or bedikas chometz or other mitzvahs, but shlichus applies to them all. And this brings us to the fundamental question we will try to explore in the next 3 days. Shlichus b'mitzvahs. To which mitzvahs does shlichus apply, and to which does not shlichus apply? There are only two Rishonim that ask this question. We only have one on our sheet, and that is the Tosfos Rid. Tosfos Rid is Rabbeinu Yeshayahu Harishon, who was in the days of the Balei HaTosfos. He's not quoted anywhere in Shas, but he is the period of Balei HaTosfos. What is interesting, never does he quote the Rambam. He didn't know the Rambam. Obviously, he wasn't aware of the Rambam, even though they were contemporaries. And Tosfos Rid is quoted in the Ktsois HaChosh and some other Achronim. Let's have a look at page number 28 in our booklet. Ein shliach ledvar aveiro. And that's a fundamental rule we will not deal with extensively in our study group. Shliach ledvar aveiro is a din b'fnei atzmoi. Ein shliach ledvar aveiro. If you make a shliach to do an aveira, it is totally his responsibility. He is liable, and not the one that sent him. The one that sent him is liable b'dei shamayim. It is between him and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But Beis Din will only demand liability from the person that actually did the aveira. And the Gemara says, why? Divrei Harav v'divrei HaTalmud, divrei mi shoymin. We turn to the person that did the aveira and we say, why did you do this? And he says, he told me to do. Are you out of your mind? He told you go and do it, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, don't. So whom are you supposed to listen to? So ein shliach dvar aveira. Let's have a look at the Tosfos Rid, page 28. Yesh makshim im kein lekol dvar mitzvah yoyel hashliach. ויאמר אדם לחברו יישב בסוכה בעבורי, הנח תפילין בעבורי. Could Reuven tell Shimon, I have a very busy day today. I don't have any time to put on tefillin. Do me a favor, put on tefillin for me. Would that work? Or a person said, I need to leave my house, but I know it's Sukkot, so do me a favor. I want you to have a meal in the sukkah for me. Would that work? So this week, in another yeshiva, I gave a shiur about Nesias Kapayim, about duchening. My late father passed away 7 years ago, was a huge Talmud Chacham, and big Ilui, very wise person, but a very tmimistic person. And he was very much into Berchas Koyanim, Nesias Kapayim. The shiur I gave this week is about Munich Chutzlaretz. Why don't we duchen every day? It has nothing to do with today's shiur. When my father, every day in the morning, he spent about 2 hours in shul and shtibelech, and he used to go from one minyan to the other, Areinchappen, another duchening. And when he traveled abroad, he traveled to Chutzlaretz, he used to pay people money, go to Nesias Kapayim Berchas Koyanim for me. He was enough of a Talmud Chacham to know that there is no Shlichus by Berchas Koyanim, but to him it was some sort of an inyan. I'm paying someone for Berchas Koyanim. He saw that as a certain schus. So Tosfos Red asks, would Shlichus apply to all the mitzvahs? And could a person say, Hanach tefillin ba'avuri? Does that make sense? So why tefillin no? And why could a father of a newborn child make a moel, a shaliach, and it is considered as if the father was makayim the mitzvah? Why does shlichus apply to some mitzvahs and it does not apply to others? Tosfos answers, Lav miltahi, shamitzvah shechai v'amokom lasas begufay, ha'echa poter hu al yedei shluchoi, v'hu lo yaseh klum. Many achronim, including the Ktsois Kuf Pei Beis, page 33, the Chasam Sofer, Tshuvas Chasam Sofer, where do we have that? Page 46. Many Achronim understood from Tosfos Red, there is a certain category which we define as mitzvah shebegufoi. A mitzvah which is on your body, literally translated. That is a mitzvah shebegufoi. Tefillah is a mitzvah shebegufoi. Mila is not. Mila Saben is on the guf of your child. Shlichus would apply. But when the mitzvah demands the involvement of your body, Shlichus would not be relevant. Sukkah is you sitting in the sukkah. Tefillin is your forehead and your arm. Shlichus wouldn't apply. That is what we define as a mitzvah shebegufoi. But bedikas chometz is not on my body. It's on my house. It's on my chometz. Milas haben is not on my body. It's about circumcising my child. And that is why Shlichus would apply. That is the fundamental understanding of many Achronim.
What about in the case of somebody who chazer b'shuva, didn't get Mila, and now is in the gut, so the Mila is on his own body. Is there Shlichus then?
That's a good question. That's a good question which would prove or disprove this understanding in the Tosfos Red. Mila is about my body. So we will deal with that in a few minutes.
One doesn't mow their own self.
So why couldn't a person hire a shliach to put on tefillin for him? If we define gufoi, is it your body or it's something external to my body? So the Ktsois Achoshen is Siman Kuf Pei Beis, and after we learn the Gemara, that will be the first source we'll deal with. And more or less, our booklet is Yesh Mugdam V'Ma'uchar. So we start off with the Tosfos Red. what is defined as a mitzvah shebegufay, we move on to the K'tzais HaChoshen. Kuf Pei Beis, Sif Kotten Beis. And the K'tzais HaChoshen asked this very same question. When the Shulchan Aruch says, B'kol davar shlichos shel adam kamoisai chutz miledvar aveiro, page number 30, Choshen Mishpat Kuf Pei Beis. B'kol davar shlichos shel adam kamoisai chutz miledvar aveiro, de kaimelon ein shliach ledvar aveiro. K'tzais HaChoshen brings Kosav Tosfos Rid. He starts off with the Tosfos Rid. And he brings the concept of mitzvah shebegufay. And then the K'tzais HaChoshen, next page 31, Hanera la'anias daiti bezeh. Shlichus shel adam kamoisei lo amrin ayla b'mideh de'asiyah. De'az havelei maseh shluchoi kamoisei aval b'mideh de'leka asiyah lo amrinan shliach shel adam kamoisei. So the K'tzais HaChoshen has his unique approach. And he said Shlichus applies only to Ma'asim. But Shlichus can't change the reality. His head is not your head. His arm is not your arm. So the K'tzais HaChoshen argues the mitzvah of tefillin is not the act. It's not Hanochas tefillin, but actually having tefillin on your head and arm. It is a matzav, not a maisa. It is a matzav, not a maisa. Mila is a maisa. You are to circumcise your child. Tefillin is not a maisa. It is a matzav. Using the K'tzais HaChoshen's language, mile di memela. I don't know how to translate midid di memela. It's just a reality. It's just a matzav. And the same sukkah. You need to dwell in the sukkah. Dwelling in the sukkah is not an act. Circumcision is an act. And that is a new definition of tefillin. It's not lahaniach tefillin. It's just carrying tefillin on your head and arm. And Shlichus applies only to acts, to deeds. But Shlichus can't make your head as if it would be yours.
Can I pay someone for Limud Torah? It's like it's a matzah. I have to know Torah. No, but me, I have to be.
Regarding Talmud Torah, there is a concept we find by no other mitzvah, and that is the Yesocha Zavurim concept. But that is unique to Talmud Torah. It has nothing to do with Shlichus. Okay, we already have material for the next few years to come. Yesocha Zavurim would be in 2 years from now. So the K'tzais HaChoshen's approach is Shlichus is only by Maisim and not by Midid Memela. He proves his point from a Rosh and a Doram Dafayim Beis. I have a different pshat in Rosh. What does the Rosh say? There's a machlaikas Rabbi Yonasan and Rabbi Yashia in a Doram Dafayim Beis. Baal Meifer Nidre Ishtoi. A husband has the authority to annul the vows, the nedorim of his wife. And there's a machlekes, could I make a shliach to annul those nedorim, or do I need to do it myself? And the Gemara makes it clear, it is only if you heard those nedorim that the question is, could I make a shliach to annul them? But if my shliach hears the nedorim, he has no authority at all. And the Rosh explains, and why not? So the Rosh says, hearing is a midid memela. Shlichus doesn't apply to hearing. And if your agent heard, it's not as if you heard. But annulling the neder is a maisa. And therefore, Shlichus would only apply to the annulment of the Nedorim, but not to listening to the Nedorim. And the understanding of the Ktsois is, hearing is a matzav. It's not a ma'aseh. It's just a reality. My shliach hears is not considered as if I was hearing. My pshat and rush would be different. Shlichus applies only to acts that have halachic bearing, halachic significance. Kinyonim, Kiddushin, Gerishin, Mitzvahs, Averis. If not for the Svora Divrei Harav and Divrei Atalm and Divrei Misham, and we would say, Yesh Shliach L'Dvar Aveira. Actually, Shamei Azoken, She'ein Aloche Kemoisei, as we see in Daf Mem Beis, Shamei Azoken maintains, Yesh Shliach L'Dvar Aveira. But whether it's a Mitzvah and Aveira, or a Kinyan, or Gerishin, or Trumas Amaisis, or Kiddushin, these are all acts that have halachic bearing. Hearing in neder has no halachic bearing, and therefore, shlichus isn't relevant. Let me give you an example. Person gives a get, and there's a condition. He stipulates. The get should be chal, the get should be valid only if I come back to the city in the next week. The person didn't come, but he sent a shliach to come back to the city. Would we say shlichos shel odom kemoisei? What I stipulated, the get will be valid only if I come. I didn't come, but I sent a shliach. Would we say shlichos shel odom kemoisei? Why not? Why not? You're right, no. But why not? The answer is very simple. Coming back to a certain place is not an act that has any halachic bearing. It has halachic bearing only because of a stipulation, but not mitzad atzmai. So when I make a tanai, if I come, if I go, if I stand on the table, if I jump off the stairs, and I made a shliach to do so, that doesn't mean anything. Shlichus doesn't apply. Shlichus is a halachic concept. It's a legal concept. And it applies only to legal acts. Whether it's Kedushin or Gerishin or a Mitzvah or an Aveda, any Ma'aseh that has halachic bearing. Maybe that's Pshat and Darash. Hearing a neder is just a fact. It has no halachic bearing. And nulling a neder, that's halacha. And therefore Shlichus wouldn't apply to listening to a neder, because listening to a neder is not a mitzvah, it's not an aved, it's not a chalois. It is an act that doesn't have direct halachic significance. And maybe that's pshat and darash. Midde de memela, there is no shlichus. So let us just once again clarify the mahalach of the Ktsois. The Ktsois says shlichus applies only to maisim. The mitzvah of tefillin is not hanochas tefillin. It is actually the fact that the tefillin are al roshei v'zeroyoi shel odom.
A little bit of a caution on the bracha. The bracha is on at least the first one.
So the approach of the Ktsois is very problematic. First of all, the way he defines tefillin. Is it clear that the mitzvah of tefillin is the result? In the bracha we say, l'haniach tefillin. But the problem with the Ktsos is far greater. Why wouldn't shlichus apply to achilas matzah? It's a ma'aseh. Why wouldn't shlichus apply to achilas matzah? To natilas lulav. Mida'ag bei nafeg bei. Ma'aseh. And why would shlichus apply to shlichus kabbalah de get? A woman could make a shliach to receive her get. V'sholach, hu oise shliach, v'shilcho, he oise shliach. No mice is required on the side of the woman, like Kabbalah a get. If a husband throws a get into her house, into a dalad amis. She is divorced. No act is required from her side, and shlichus does apply. So we find halachas that do not entail a ma'isa, and shlichus does apply. And there are many mitzvahs that do involve a ma'isa, and shlichus does not apply. And just as examples, netilas lulav, achilas matzah, mikro megillah, or even davening, would dibber be considered a ma'isa? And why not? So the approach of the Ktsois is somewhat problematic. In our contrast, we have two fundamentally different approaches. Number one is the Ktsois. And there's a stira in the Ktsois. Kif pei beis does not go well I'm looking for Ktsois number 2, and I do not find it. But we do have a stira in the Chasam Sofer as well. Kuf Nun Tes, page 47. Reish Aleph, page 46. The other approach would be Maharach or Zarua, and that would be following the Ktsois. Maharach or Zarua, page 40. Koivit Shiurim, at the very last page of our booklet, page 62. So what I wanted to present and explain to you in this introductory shiur is just the fundamental concepts. Many achronim that say Shlichus has two different sides: delegating authority, enabling someone to work in my arena, in my balus, selling, purchasing, divorcing, doing kiddushin for me, acts that demand the authority of Bailam, of an owner. And I give my agent authority to do things on my behalf. And the other aspect of Shlichus would be where there is no chalais, mitzvahs. And mitzvahs would be a slightly different definition. What he does is considered as if I did. So concept number 2 relates to the act. Concept number 1 would relate more to the result. But I argued, in the Gemara, it seems to be very clear that everything boils down to the same concept. And therefore, if not for the nuances between Gerushin, Truma, Shlichus HaPesach, we would learn one from the other. Even though Gerushin is a chalais, Truma is a chalais, Shlichus HaPesach is a mitzvah. And they are the same. So fundamentally, Shlichus is whatever you need to do, you could do by another person. He can do on your behalf. And that brings us to the question, what about mitzvahs? Which mitzvahs does Shlichus apply and which mitzvahs does Shlichus not apply? Mitzvah shebegufay. How do we define mitzvah shebegufay? We saw definition number 1 is problematic. Mitzvah shebegufay meaning my body. Who says that tefillin is about my body and milah is not about my body or my child's body? So let me share with you fundamentally approach number 2, but I want you to learn the sources, and we'll be back towards the end of the week. Approach number 2 would differentiate between mitzvahs shebegavra and mitzvahs shebechefza, and mitzvahs in which the objective, the goal is the result, the outcome, and in those cases Shlichus would apply, between mitzvahs in which the essence of the mitzvah is not the result, not the outcome, but actually being engaged in a ma'isa. There is no result. And an example would be achilas matzah, different than milas habein. Circumcising your son has a very clear result. Your child from now and throughout his entire life will have the chaysim of ois bris kodesh. That is a result. Eating matzah is all about eating matzah. There is no result. There is no outcome. And in those mitzvahs, Shlichus wouldn't apply, and maybe that is what we define as a mitzvah shebegufay. It is all about what you're doing and not about what you're achieving. It's not about the outcome, but rather about the actual deed.
So if this was a hefty concept, then it would be
Maybe. So these are the two fundamental approaches. We need to go through the Gemara, go through the Tosfos Rid, and I will need to send some supplementary sources because there are 3 Ktsosim, and they don't fit in with one another. 3 Chasam Soifers. In our booklet we have 2. So if we have this Yarchei Kallah in the future, we will need to do a better job in producing the booklet. This year I will need to send some additional materials just to make this experience more enriching, more exciting, and more all-encompassing. It's a pleasure to have you all in Eretz Yisrael and to see people coming from far away to learn Torah in Yerushalayim, Yir HaKodesh, in such difficult times is very heartwarming. And it is very special to all of us living here in Eretz Yisrael because, as you all know and as you all feel, this is a difficult period in our story when this war is still not over after 9 months. And today a soldier died, and we're losing young people almost every day. So we need schusim, and coming to learn Torah from far away in Yerushalayim, Yir HaKodesh, is a huge schus, and it is very much appreciated. So I hope you will enjoy your coming days in the Beis Medrash and Somayach, and the light of Torah should give us all a lot of simcha. So it's a pleasure to have you here, and we'll see you.